Morning, guys. We are on day 5 of our journey together. I wanted to talk a little bit about Joshua chapter 1, about when the people of God were crossing over over the Jordan and into the land that God had promised them. God had prepared the people, and now He was ready to bring them in and for them to go across and begin to remove the things that were there, so that they could have a dwelling place. And of course that was progressional. There was areas that were overgrown, there's areas that other people had inhabited, and God wanted to fully transition the land over to the new people, to God's people. So there was incremental progressions in that it wasn't just, oh, there's the land and you can just, I'm going to get rid of them all for you. There was a participation on the people's part to go and to actually do the thing, to go actually and unfortunately to go and remove people physically, to slaughter people, which is maybe another story. So this principle that we read about in Joshua chapter 1, these encouraging words to be strong and courageous, that I'm with you, that everywhere you place your foot, that I will give you the land, and these powerful words. I think there's a real life application, New Testament application to our spirituality, which I feel like a lot of the Old Testament does a beautiful job of illustrating things that go on spiritually. So this New Testament reality that the Scriptures teaches us to pray on behalf of all men, lifting up requests to God, and make your prayers and petitions known to God, and the peace that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So there's and of course, as we mentioned yesterday, we talked about Paul not being able to go certain places without God putting prayers in people's hearts and mouths to break down the barriers that would prevent him from coming. And I feel like that's real life spirituality there. That we're talking about real life stuff here. We're not just talking about just the superficial religion that can just be about putting up a building and saying all the right things. No, there's a real life reality to the environments that we're in where things have been overgrown and things have been, there are forces and people and sinful acts over certain areas, certain businesses, if you will, where when you step foot into that business, you just can't begin to just to say Jesus this, Jesus that, and proclaim the gospel, although there might be times and moments for that. No, there's most likely a fight that has to be fought in the prayer room, has to be fought in the prayer closet, where you ask on God's behalf, on these people's behalf, that God give you the land, that God give you the ability, that you even ask for God to have that authority. You declare that authority over areas of it, and you believe for that. There's been times in my life where I have been in a new kind of mission field, and it was a year or two before I actually felt the release and the freedom to be myself in Christ, to talk about Him. And then after that, it kind of dumbfounded people, the liberty I felt and exercised in talking about Jesus. I think sometimes when we hear about the laws or about whether or not we have the freedom to talk about Jesus at our workplaces, we live in some kind of fear of that, as if that is a reality for us who are living for the King. Ultimately, we've laid down our lives. That is the call of the cross, is that we would pick up our cross, follow Jesus unto death. And so for us, that doesn't necessarily mean physically, although maybe it will one day, but it definitely means spiritually and socially. That is, if we don't die socially, man, I think that's the first thing that area we have to die in. We have to be rejected by those whom esteem us in the world and who would want to hide in their own darkness. We have to be dangerous with the truth. And more importantly, dangerous with the truth in the quiet places, in the secret places, in the prayer room, so that after 1 or 2 years, as I mentioned to you before, after 1 or 2 years of being friends with folks and being just connected with them deeply, I feel the freedom to say that, hey, I'm a Christian, and I began to express appropriately that that Jesus is my Lord. And so at that point, after having established a relationship, then comes the ability to really be evangelical, because they've been experiencing my compassion for them, my real life humanity with them, not just some kind of religious rhetoric, but from a real life relationship. And so then they have to deal with that. They have to deal with the ramifications of my presence there. So I guess, all that being said, our prayers and the foundation of heaven have to be laid before we actually have a mission to do, a thing to do that's going to be done in His name, that's going to be effective in His name. There's times and places where we have the freedom and God gives us the grace to go into a place and to be a powerhouse of spirituality. But I don't think that's the norm. So I guess my prayer for us today is that God would make us aware of the prayers we need to pray for our environments. He would make us aware of the areas that He hasn't given us because we haven't asked, the areas where we want to be evangelical, the peoples whose world we want to affect, but whom we're not affecting because we haven't spent 1 minute of time praying for those people, praying for those situations, praying down the darkness from around them so that they might see the light. Guys, bless you today. Enjoy this National Day of Prayer. See you tomorrow.